Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tracie Napoli, Director of Fund Development at MARCOM at Osteoporosis Canada, and I will be your cook-along host. Before we begin, Osteoporosis Canada acknowledges the land that our offices, located in Toronto, are on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. Welcome to today's cook-along, and we thank our partner, the Winnipeg Foundation, as they help provide the opportunity for us to host this today. In addition to everyone who will be cooking along today, we have Zoom attendees, and we are also live streaming this webinar on the Osteoporosis Canada Facebook page. So a big welcome to everyone who is watching today. This webinar will provide general information about cooking and food knowledge. It is not intended as individualized health or nutrition advice. If you have questions about nutrition, consult a physician or registered dietitian. Now, during the webinar, if you are watching on Zoom, you can enter questions by clicking the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Or if you're watching via Facebook, you can enter your question in the comments section, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can during the webinar within the time available. Before we get started, just a quick note that nutrition is a key component for strong and healthy bones. Calcium, vitamin D, and protein are essential nutrients for proper bone health. Fish and shellfish are considered an excellent source of high-quality protein, and fish is one of the best sources of omega-3 fatty acids. Fish is the most significant source of naturally occurring vitamin D, which plays an important role in the body's use of calcium, a mineral required for sound teeth and bones. And fish and shellfish also contribute valuable minerals to the diet, such as selenium, iodine, magnesium, iron, and copper, which the body requires for diverse functions such as growth, repair, and proper functioning. So let's get cooking. Today's featured recipe is shrimp and herb stuffed shells with 350 milligrams of calcium and 39 grams of protein per serving. Now, if you're not a fan of shrimp or fish, or shellfish, or maybe you're not too comfortable cooking those ingredients, this is a great recipe to help introduce you to this versatile ingredient. Now, to find this recipe and other recipes, you can visit our website at osteoporosis.ca/recipes. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Emily Richards, who's a professional home economist, freelance food writer, chef, and who's the author and co-author of 9 cookbooks. Emily also writes and develops recipes for print and online publications that include everyday cooking and healthy eating and can be found on TV, radio, she did actually a TV segment earlier today, and webcasts just like this one. So we're very excited to have Emily. Emily, welcome.
Thanks, Tracie. Hey, everybody. I'm so glad to be here on a Tuesday night. And I did have to actually question what night it was. So maybe many of you are in the same boat. And I'm so excited to do this cook along. We're doing one of my favorite recipes. It's been in kind of my repertoire for a long time. So, you know, get ready with your questions because hopefully I'll be able to answer them all. The exciting part is that I have people cooking with me tonight in Winnipeg. So I'm so excited. And they got beautiful groceries ready. And the pots of water are on, I hope. Hopefully your pots may even be boiling. I actually had to turn mine down a little bit because it was at a rolling boil. So if it is, turn it down a bit, but we are going to get started with the pasta first because we are doing stuffed shells and we need that pasta cooked. And jumbo shells are a fabulous ingredient because if you've ever done stuffed cannelloni, or stuffed manicotti, which is the pasta shell tube, it can be really tricky to kind of fill them. The jumbo shells are actually super easy to fill because they're open already. So it makes this dish really, really easy to work with. So in the recipe, it calls for 16 of these jumbo shells. We're actually going to put a few extra into our water just in case we have some tear as they're cooking, okay? So if everyone's water is at a boil, mine was boiling. Of course, now it's died down because I turned down the heat. But what I want to do is season the water a little bit, just so that we can get some flavor going into our pasta. So I have a fairly large pot here. I'm going to say it's about 16 cups of water. So what I would say for about 16 cups of water, I'd put about a tablespoon of salt in, okay? I know it may sound like a lot, but we want to have that flavor transfer into the pasta so that it tastes good all the way through. Often you may hear chefs or cooks say, you want it to taste like the sea. And I'm sure you all know, seawater doesn't taste that great. So we don't want it to be salty. We just want it to have a nice flavor, okay? So for everyone who has their pot boiling, let's put in 20 shells, okay? Let's hope that we don't need those 4 shells, but count them as they go in. I'm gonna do 4 at a time here in hopes that I'll count them properly. So that was 8, 12, 16. Make sure that they're not stuck together. This one's a little bit like a jigsaw puzzle. So undo them. That was 16, right? And I said 20, so let's get 20 in there, okay? Now, if you wanted to, you could throw in a few more because leftover pasta is a great thing to have on hand for any dinner. And even though we're stuffing these shells, you could just use them as a pasta for any dish. Now, once they go in, you do need to stir them, okay? So make sure you give them a stir so that they're not kind of on top of each other. And the thing with boiling pasta, you want to make sure that you have a nice big pot so that the pasta can actually move around, okay? That's really important so that they don't stick together. And in this case, we don't want them to kind of fold back into each other. So this is going to take about 7 minutes or so. The best thing to do when you're cooking pasta is to just let it cook at an approximate time and then taste it for doneness. And what we're looking for is a nice tender pasta. We don't want it too firm, but we also don't want it mushy because it's going into the oven, having that second bake, okay? Now I'm just gonna move mine to the back of, to my back stove here because I want to continue on because we have a beautiful sauce to make for this too. So I'm also gonna put my timer on so I don't forget about my pasta. I'm gonna come back and check it in about 5 minutes, okay? Because I'm gonna try to multitask here. All right, so normally what we do during these cook-alongs is we get some of our mise en place ready, so our ingredients ready. Most of the ingredients are already measured out and at room temperature, which will make this sauce come together super, super easily. But we have a couple things we'd like to chop. So what we're gonna start off with is our broccoli. We're using cooked broccoli tonight. And so we have some nice big spears, they're bright green. Now here's something for those of you that wanna make this again, or perhaps this weekend, you can actually use frozen broccoli for this as well. And all you have to do is thaw it and chop it, okay? So we want this to be distributed really nicely throughout the shells. So we're just gonna chop it into little pieces. There's no ifs, ands, or buts of what this needs to look like, but you basically just want it in small pieces. So I'm just going to, and we're using the stems as well, because that's gonna offer up a nice little bit of texture. So just kind of a little bit smaller than bite-sized pieces, because remember, they do have to go into the shell. And we're using small shrimp tonight. And the small shrimp, so think salad shrimp. If you've ever had that shrimp salad, the cold shrimp salad, they're usually those tiny little shrimp. That's a perfect shrimp for this dish. I know we don't use them very often, but if you can't find those, because they aren't always available, you can just use regular cooked shrimp, so any size, and then chop them, okay? But tonight we're gonna use the small ones just to make our lives easier. And we are using all shrimp tonight, but that's the great part about this dish is the versatility of it. So Tracie chatted right in the beginning, there may be some of you who aren't seafood fans, and that's okay. I know there's not fans of other things that we're using tonight. I won't mention them, Tracie, but I'm using one right now.
Okay, Emily, let's not tell everyone I'm not a fan of broccoli.
That's okay, because when Tracie makes this, she's going to use rapini or maybe asparagus or maybe kale, right? Those are lots of great options because we're getting some great color, and we're also getting some nutrient powerhouse there too. In the fact that I always love adding a little bit of color, but there's always the nutritional benefits of adding vegetables. So any of those would work here too, provided you cook them first. So in the case of broccoli, if you're using fresh broccoli, you do need to cook it for about 4 or 5 minutes. So you get this beautiful bright green color out of the broccoli, and it's tender, but still firm. It's not mushy. You would do the exact same thing if you were using rapini, or if you wanted to use broccolini, that would be delicious in here too. And if you use any of the soft tender greens like kale, you only need a minute or two to wilt them and chop them up as well. So there's lots of options already for those that don't like this green vegetable. So this is how I know that Tracie will make it another time.
Emily?
Yes.
Emily?
Yes.
How fine are you chopping it? How small, how fine?
If I were to get my ruler out, and I will because I have it right here. I have my kitchen ruler. I'm going to show you right here in my second camera here. It's about a 1/2 inch piece. So if we're talking millimeters, it's how many millimeters is that? 1? No, 1. Yes, it's 1. No, 1 centimeter.
Okay.
1/2 inch. So it does. But if you chop them smaller, that's okay too. What that means is that if they're smaller, they have better distribution. That's all. Okay. Just like if you chop the shrimp smaller, you're gonna have better distribution as well. Okay, so we need a cup and a half. You're welcome. We need a cup and a half of that broccoli. Okay, and because I wasn't quite sure what everyone was gonna get, I've already measured it out. I have a cup and a half in my dry measuring cups ready to go. Okay, so I talked about different options for vegetables, but what about those different options for the shrimp? We'll talk about those later because we're gonna add that later. I'm just gonna give my cutting board a wipe. Stir your pasta. I'm gonna go stir my pasta because it's behind me. And then we're going to get our sauce ready, or at least start it, okay? So by stirring my pasta shells, I already can feel that they're not tender at all. So I'm going to add a few more minutes to my timer. Whoops. There we go. And we're gonna start our sauce. So the sauce that we're making tonight is a bechamel sauce. It's a milk sauce, it's a mother sauce. So it's actually used as a starter sauce for many, many other dishes. And because we have everything at room temperature, it will come together fairly quickly. We're gonna start off with our butter, okay? So I have two tablespoons, of butter going into my saucepan. And for the saucepan that we're using, let's go medium saucepan. So to review our saucepan size, this is small, this is medium, and then anything bigger like the pasta pot I used is large, okay? So we wanna go medium because that will help give us a larger surface area for our sauce to thicken, okay? So in goes our butter, and we're gonna work over medium heat here, okay? So that we start to melt our butter. And we need our all-purpose flour ready to go and our milk. So you'll need your utensils. You need a whisk and a spoon. We're gonna start off with our whisk first, okay? So in most cases, when we are using butter in a recipe, if it doesn't specify, it's salted, okay? If you are worried about salt, you can always use unsalted butter, okay? So never worry about that. Sometimes the flavor changes a bit because that little bit of salt comes through, but you can always add a pinch of salt at the end if you wanted to. So we wanna make sure that our butter is melted so that we can whisk in the flour. I'm gonna ask this question and you can type it in the chat or you can unmute yourself and see who's going to respond to what we're doing. When I add the flour to the butter, what are we making? It's like a Jeopardy question. Does anyone? A roux, exactly. We are making a roux. So this is actually the start of our bechamel. And for those of you that love making homemade mac and cheese, one of my favorites, this is a very similar process that you would start with, okay? Now, one of the reasons why we add that flour in there is because we want to cook it a little bit. Now, if I was making something like a jambalaya or another different type of stew where I want to add depth of color and flavor, I would actually cook this for a lot longer than kind of the minute that we're doing here. So I'm just going to cook it. We're not changing the color here. We're just kind of letting it bubble up. And then we're gonna slowly add our milk. Okay, it's 2 cups of milk. So it's an easy amount to remember. And of course, everything's happening at the same time. There goes my timer. Well, my timer's gonna have to wait. Sorry, everybody, you're gonna have to hear it beep. So it's 2 tablespoons butter, 2 tablespoons flour, and 2 cups of milk. Okay, and I'm just doing a slow, gradual addition as I whisk everything in. And the whisking is just to kind of help get that butter flour mixture nice and smooth. And I'm gonna step away just for a second so I can turn off that timer and give my pasta a stir. I can feel it's getting a little bit softer. I'm just gonna give it another 2 minutes. How's everybody else's pasta doing? I see everyone whisking right now, so don't forget you do have your pasta shells in the pot. This is when if you have a helper in the kitchen, it's really handy to keep them on whisking duty, okay? That's always a good opportunity to get somebody whisking. Now this process does take a little bit of time, okay? Because what we're trying to do is use that little bit of flour to thicken our milk, okay? To get our bechamel going. Now, if you were to need a substitute, now this recipe is great because we can talk a lot about substitutions tonight. There are lots of options for different ingredients. If you needed a substitution, for example, for dairy, you can definitely use substitutions for dairy. We're actually using milk here for a couple reasons. It's part of the mother sauce, but it's also a great way to bump up our calcium in this dish. So if you are looking for substitutions, make sure you kind of keep track of what you're using because it's not always about just flavor. It's also about its health benefits as well, okay? So I'm just gently whisking, and this isn't a process that you wanna rush. I don't wanna crank up the heat because as we all know, milk on the stove can cause a big mess. And we don't want to scorch our sauce. We want a really nice flavor here, okay? So it may take 5 minutes, it may take 10 minutes. If you do need to step away and you don't have a helper, make sure you take this sauce off the heat, okay? Because your pasta may be ready about the same time as your sauce. So either turn off your heat if you have a gas burner or induction. If you have an electric stove, take it off the heat so it doesn't keep cooking while you deal with your pasta shell, okay? Because we don't want to lose our pasta shell. So I'm actually gonna turn my heat off because my pasta shells are done and they need to be drained, okay? So if anyone else has it, check your pasta shells. And what you can do is just take one out. You can give it a little squeeze between your finger. I'll bring one over to the camera. Okay, and I'll just hold it up here, okay? So here's one of the pasta shells. Just, you'll give it a little squeeze. So it should be nice and pliable. And if you want, what you can do is actually just cut a little bit off or take a bite of one, okay? That's okay. I can do that. I'll take a bite of one. And you should be able to easily bite through it with a nice little bite. So we all know the term al dente, which means to the tooth. Doesn't mean hard as a tooth, but it does have still some texture in the bit of pasta, typically in the center. So it's ready to drain. So I'm going to do that. I'm just looking for my, there they are. Okay, so colander in the sink, drain the pasta, and we're going to run some cold water over it. Okay, if you have a big bowl, you can also, to chill them a little bit quicker, you could always have a bowl with some ice water in it and then just shock them in that. But for us, because we're actually making everything tonight as we go along, cold water is perfect for it, okay? So as I'm, Tracie, do we have any questions? I'm kind of.
Actually, yeah, this is a great time. We have a couple of questions. So somebody asked if the milk should be heated before you added it to the flour to make the roux. Some recipes do call for that. Was yours cold milk? Was it just like out of the fridge for about half an hour? Had you warmed it up?
So that's a great question. And it really does depend on the person cooking. So you can heat it up. You could also have it at room temperature, or you could pull it out of the refrigerator. So all those options are viable. What happens is it just changes the length of time the sauce cooks. So if you warm up your milk and whisk it in, this sauce will cook a little bit faster because you've already heated up the milk. At room temperature, it will do the same thing. Cold milk will just take a little bit longer. So that's where you'd have to pay attention to the thickness of the bechamel as it's cooking. So you have all the options. Now, oftentimes I just measure the milk, leave it at room temperature. So by the time that I'm ready to cook, like I did tonight, it'll come together fairly quickly. So if you don't do that though, that's okay. The sauce will still work. So that's good to know.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Emily.
Oh, you're welcome.
Things are looking good.
I'm just bringing my shells over. They're still in the colander, but I'm going to, this is just a slightly damp, clean tea towel. Stress that part, it is clean. And I'm going to just put my shells out on the tea towel. Why am I doing this? Well, because they get stuck together. So this is your opportunity to pull them apart. And this is, see, one of mine ripped, but that's okay. It'll still get filled. One broke. See, it's good that we put some extra ones in. Maybe mine are gonna be really bad. Nope, I've got some good ones here. Now don't worry if they are, see how they kind of, this one really rolled up tight. When we go to fill it, we're just going to open it up and use the cavity of it, okay? So don't worry if they look kind of like they've rolled back up, that they're hiding. So just kind of put these all in a single layer and undo the ones that are tucked together. And you can enjoy the ripped ones if you want right now, if you need a snack as you're cooking. But for the ones that we don't stuff, we can actually use as a base on the bottom of our casserole, okay? A little bit of extra protective coating. The bonus is we get to eat it at the end, so it's okay. I think I've got, yeah, just a couple little broken pieces here and one more shell. Perfect. So I'll get this out of the way and then we'll get back to our sauce. How's everyone's shells? They all kind of done at the same time? I know it's always tricky because it depends on the pot that you're using and how quickly your water came to boil. I'm just gonna lift these guys up here so that they're a little bit out of the way. And I'll turn my sauce back on so we can get cooking again. Tracie, did you have any other questions?
Yeah, I did. I had another quick question. So yeah, if somebody wanted to substitute the butter for, let's say, avocado oil and perhaps use, instead of flour, use tapioca or cornstarch, would that work? I mean, I know we talk a lot about substitutions, but how far can you substitute in a recipe before things may or may not taste the same or the structure may not be there?
Well, as soon as you use anything that has a flavor, so an oil like avocado oil or even extra virgin olive oil, they have a little bit of flavor, which will be imparted into this sauce. So if you wanted to use an oil, I'd use a neutral oil. Canola oil would work beautifully here because it doesn't have that flavor coming through. So you can actually start with that. And then you could use the flour. So that substitution would work for butter. Now, as soon as you start changing the starches, that's where things sometimes get a little tricky because they don't have the same power as flour. I didn't mean to rhyme, but it just kind of sounds cute. Flour power. If you're using something like cornstarch, typically you add it near the end, okay? So that it has its thickening power kind of works in a shorter period of time. Don't not pay attention to your sauce like I did. I didn't see, I'm so focused on Tracie's question that I just kind of forgot about the sauce. The heat was up too high, so I just turned it down a bit, okay? By the way, you can switch to a spoon. You don't have to keep whisking. I'm gonna switch to a spoon just because I can, you know, dirty another spoon. Why not? Turn the heat down a little bit because the sauce is bubbling. Now we just wanna let it cook and thicken a little bit, okay? So if you're using something like cornstarch, typically you would use about a tablespoon or two to thicken the same amount of liquid. And tapioca, there's a recommendation of how much you would add as well for the amount of liquid. So you could whisk that with a little bit of cold milk and then stir it in at the end, and you'll still get that nice thickness. Sometimes these starches change a little bit when you reheat them then a second time, which this pasta goes in to be baked again. In our case, it's not going to do too much damage because it's a filling. And the only change that might occur is because we're using some of it as the topping, it may split a little bit. So anytime you use substitutions, it's hard to say it's going to work for sure. Unless it's a similar type ingredient. So for example, I've made roux a bunch of times with canola oil and it works beautifully. I've also used non-dairy beverages like soy or almond to make the same thing and it works really well. So those I can speak to because I have tried them and they have worked. So hopefully that answers the question. And I wasn't too aloof on that.
No, that's great. That's great. I mean, I'm just going to reinforce like just one thing is that, you know, we set up these recipes so that they have those nutrients that we're looking for, protein and calcium. So if you are going to, not so much with the flour and the butter for the roux, but if you are going to swap out, let's say milk and change it with something else, try to make sure you read product labels so that you have the protein and the calcium in another product. Or if you don't prefer broccoli, let's say like somebody like me, and you want to replace the vegetable, try to find a vegetable that has that calcium in it, just so that we're getting the full benefit wherever possible. I mean, this recipe is great because it has so many different ingredients that do have both calcium and protein. So
yes,
that's
and
great.
It's a whopping, and I think it's a whopping amount, Tracie, too, which is always great, right? Like that's 350 milligrams, and the protein is
39
awesome.
grams.
So 39, see?
39.
Even more than what I thought.
There you go. All right, how's everyone doing, Emily?
I'm hoping that your sauce is getting thick or thickened, and I'll show you the great test for this. If you're using a wooden spoon, that's why I kind of hinted you should switch from a whisk to a spoon. But what I want you to do is coat the back of your spoon, wipe your finger down it, okay, quickly because it is hot. And I want you to take a look at my spoon, okay? And where I wiped my finger is a straight line. So what that means is that it's thickened and it's not filling back in. So it's thick enough to the point that we can stop cooking it, okay? So if you've got it, you've got this lovely little stripe down your spoon, you can take this sauce off the heat, okay? Hopefully that everybody's kind of close. I'm gonna just give my hand a wash here, get some of the bechamel off. So as a side note, this sauce right now is not seasoned, okay? So it doesn't have any flavor to it, but this mother sauce can be used for a million different things. So just imagine you didn't want to use shrimp and broccoli tonight, or you want to make this another night, you could actually add a cup of sharp cheddar to this and just stir in some cooked pasta. Okay, you have a wonderful, easy one-pot mac and cheese. Okay, so this is the start of something, essentially one thing into many things. What we're going to do now is take some of this sauce out. Okay, but first we have to season it. So don't take it out yet. We're gonna add our seasonings. Some nice lemon. So get your lemon out. And for those of you that have a rasp, this is a microplane or a rasp, you can use that, or you can use the fine side of your grater, okay? Because we need that zest from the lemon. This is also when you're going to get your cream cheese, okay? And your salt and pepper. We'll get to the herbs in a minute because we're gonna chop some of those up, okay? So let's start off with our cream cheese because we want to melt it. So I'm going to, and it's probably soft already because your cream cheese has been out at room temperature. And if you need to switch back to your whisk, you can. So we're using half a cup of cream cheese. Now, if you're not a fan of cream cheese or you think it doesn't have enough flavor, what you can do is use an herb and garlic cream cheese. That'll bump up the flavor for sure. That'll give us some herb flavor and garlic flavor, but we're gonna add fresh herbs, so we know we're gonna get that flavor. You could also, goat cheese would work here. It wouldn't be as smooth because of the cream cheese being super smooth, but you could definitely use goat cheese. And one of my favorites is ricotta cheese. You could stir that in here as well, and that would be absolutely delicious, okay? So let's add our lemon zest as well. I'm just gonna stir this a little bit more to break down that cream cheese. And I'm just gonna take the zest off my lemon, okay? So I hope you all washed your lemon first. I know I should have told you that first, but anytime you're using citrus, it's always a good idea to give it a wash. You can use a soapy water on it, and that just kind of removes, sometimes there's that little bit of, it almost feels like a little bit of a waxy residue on it. You just give it a wash and you'll know right away that you've, rubbed the oils on the lemon because it starts to smell like lemon. Now we only need a teaspoon, and oftentimes I find a teaspoon of lemon rind or lemon zest is about 1 lemon, okay? And then you're gonna add that right into your sauce. And why lemon? Because we're using seafood, and I think it's a perfect pairing. You don't always think of kind of cream or dairy with lemon, but it works really, really well. It almost cuts the kind of richness of it. So it's kind of nice to have it. And once you add it, it smells amazing. Okay, now we're gonna add our salt and pepper so that it's all seasoned. I'm gonna grab my whisk again here so that I can make sure I get it nice and smooth. Okay, there, that's better. And then I'm going to measure out my salt and pepper, which is, I'm gonna just make sure, 1/4 teaspoon salt and pepper. Now, if you're wondering why it seems like a little, because it is a little bit of salt and pepper. Typically, seafood has a little bit more of a saltier flavor than other proteins. So it's nice to kind of, if you have the opportunity, you can taste the seafood before you use it and see how salty it actually is. But in our case, just that little bit of salt and pepper will help bring out the lemon flavor in the sauce as well. Okay. So there is our seasoning. How's everybody doing? I see some lemon grating happening, which is awesome. I see some stirring, which is even better. That means that we're kind of all at the same level. It's a little bit tricky sometimes to kind of, I'm used to and I'm sure everyone is in their own kitchen, you're kind of used to just making everything and moving on. So it's good to kind of keep check and make sure that I'm not jumping too far ahead. So I usually tell everyone that, if you guys give me the thumbs up, we can keep going. Does anyone have any thumbs up for me right now? Oh, I see a couple. Whew, good. If you have given me the thumbs up, we're going to do some chopping. I wanted to chop the herbs right when we needed them. I hope that's okay. Just to get that freshness out of them. And we're using 2 fresh herbs, 2 of my favorite fresh herbs, basil and flat leaf parsley, also known as Italian parsley. So we need 2 tablespoons of each. If you want to add more, totally acceptable. Fresh herbs are absolutely delicious. In this sauce, they're going to get baked with the filling. but you can even chop some and sprinkle some on at the end. How much is 2 tablespoons of chopped parsley? I don't know, about this much. As leaves, I usually do a guesstimate, okay? So I am just using the leaves and small stems of the parsley. And you just kind of want to bunch it all together, just like this, okay? And then with your knife, give it a little chop. And try to keep it together in your little bunch. Have a good grip on your knife. And then just go back and forth to get it into small pieces. Okay? And this doesn't have to be perfect. If, as I said, if you have a little extra, that's okay, because it can go into the sauce, or you can actually save it and sprinkle some on the top. I'm just going to put mine in the little bowl that I had again. Okay. And then I'm going to use my measuring spoons here to add 2 tablespoons right into my sauce. 1 and 2. So I chopped about 3 with that little bunch. So I'm going to save this last tablespoon here to sprinkle over top. Now basil's a little bit different because sometimes you get really large leaves or small leaves. I have a little basil plant, so all my leaves are quite small. So I'm just going to pinch off a few of them. And again, just using the smaller stems left on, okay? So if you have large leaves, you can do the same thing. Leave that tiny little stem on at the end, and then just kind of stack them up so that you can chop them all together. So kind of similar to what we're doing with the parsley. I think this will give me a couple tablespoons. I'll get a couple more here, just because these leaves are so small, but they have a wonderful aroma. I think fresh basil can make anything much better. All right, so same thing, I just keep them nice and tight. And if you put the leaves on top of each other, you have them sliced up, and then again, just give them another little chop. Now, basil is a little bit more of a delicate fresh herb, so I would put mint in that category and cilantro as well. So what ends up happening is as soon as you cut it, I'm just putting it right into the sauce, tends to oxidize and turn a little bit black. So if you were to do that, chop this ahead of time and put it in the sauce, it's not a big deal because it won't affect the flavor because it's all going in together, okay? And then now we have a nice little flecks of the fresh herbs in our sauce as well, okay? There. So now I'm going to take some of this sauce out. And so are you, because this is going to be the topping. So this sauce has 2 purposes. It's part of the filling and our topping, okay? So I'm just gonna confirm how much we need here because I don't wanna tell you the wrong thing. 1 cup, okay? So we need 1 cup of sauce in here. 1 cup. Leave the rest in the saucepan. Don't dirty another bowl. Okay. There's my 1 cup of sauce is going to get set aside. Now to the remaining of sauce, this is where we're going to add our chopped broccoli, our shrimp, and I think that's it. I know it sounds like I was going to say something else, but I'm just making sure. Yes, our broccoli and shrimp. So that lovely 1.5 cups of chopped broccoli that we did goes in. Try not to add any water. I got a little bit of water in there, I saw. And our chopped shrimp, or our small shrimp. We're using 1 pound in this recipe, okay? Now, if you're thinking to yourself, I'd like to try this with something else, not so much a shrimp fan. Great source of protein, by the way. What you can do, I'm gonna just use this one and add my shrimp here, okay? You can add your shrimp as well. You can use other seafood or other fish. So if you had some cooked salmon, let's say you roasted a side of salmon, and you had a lot left over, you could actually do shrimp and salmon. You could also add some canned salmon, okay? Which and Tracie and I have talked about this before, when you use something like canned salmon, you can mash up the bones in the salmon, and the benefit of calcium essentially skyrockets, don't you think, Tracie? Can I use that word, or is that?
Well, yes, yes, canned salmon, but you have to eat the bones. And a lot of people say, well, oh, I can't imagine myself eating the bones from a can of salmon. When you mush them up, because they're so soft, and it's the process that the fish goes through in the can that essentially makes the bones edible, and also contains the calcium that you need. So a lot of people will think that fresh salmon has that same effect, but it doesn't. Fresh salmon's good for other stuff, but in terms of the calcium, it's really in the tinned salmon, just like sardines. Not sure if this would be good for sardines, Emily, but I'm thinking maybe not. I mean, unless you really love sardines.
I think if you love sardines, I think I saw some faces that were like, sardines.
Yeah.
We'll do a much tastier sardine recipe another time.
Okay,
but no, I think so. I wouldn't take canned salmon and use a pound of canned salmon in this recipe, because it would be too overwhelming. But there's no reason why I couldn't use, half a pound of shrimp and a can of salmon. And again, mashing it up, stirring it in, and you'll have a nice balance of salmon and shrimp. The other thing that you could use, it's a great canned protein, is canned crab. And there's also different varieties of crab available. So if you wanted to have it a little bit more of, a mixed seafood, you could use canned crab, or sometimes it's frozen. And, same process with shrimp. It comes frozen. You need to thaw it well, so in the refrigerator. Usually takes overnight, and then drain it really well so that you get rid of that excess water, and then you can add it into the dish. So there's lots of options here. If you're not a seafood fan, you can still benefit from the protein by adding something like leftover roast chicken, or another type of lighter protein. So I would say, we mentioned salmon, chicken would work, turkey. Just chop it up and stir it in where you're using the shrimp. Okay, changes the flavor. You're still getting the benefit of the protein, and we still have that great milk-based sauce that's kind of keeping it all together. Okay, so if you have all your ingredients in your sauce, we can actually start filling our shells. But I want you to get your casserole dish ready first. The reason being is, if I put the pasta right in here, it may stick. So you have a couple of options. I usually take the easiest one, and that is just drizzling some oil in the casserole dish. I take my fingers and just rub it. This is also a good way to give yourself a little bit of home spa treatment and rub the oil in your hands. There, okay, so just up the sides as well, just because I want to make sure as the pasta kind of sits in it. The casserole size is 11 by 7 that I'm using. If you wanted to use 2 smaller pans, you totally could do that. If you're doing a porch drop off later tonight, you could definitely do that as well, okay? All right, now I do need a spoon to fill. Oh, you know what you need to do as well? Turn your oven on to 400. Oh, I just lost so 400. I lost an earbud, which is very common these days. There we are. Okay. Let's hope I don't lose it again. All right. So nothing fancy here, just a spoon. And you start filling your shells. So open them up. Take a spoonful. Okay. And just kind of hold it open. If you can, there we go. Okay, and start filling your shells. So this may vary, depending on how small you chopped your broccoli or how big it is, how big your shrimp are. So having 16 shells is our goal, but maybe you'll have a couple less or a couple more. For those of you that have some broken shells, like I did, this also helps when you want to take the shells out after. So these are my broken pieces right here. You can actually just break them up a little bit more and put them right on the bottom. Okay, it's a little bit of a protective layer. when it comes to baking them. And then you just get to eat the extra pasta. So you can do that for any ones that have ripped in half or were completely broken, okay? So in goes some more shells. As I'm filling shells, Tracie, if anyone has any questions, I don't know if you have any questions or if anyone that's cooking along tonight has any questions.
Well, just want to confirm one of the items. So is the fish cooked before you put it in, or is the fish raw?
The fish is cooked. We're using cooked shrimp tonight. Cooked shrimp. So, okay. Cooked shrimp. So if you don't have cooked shrimp, or maybe you picked up the wrong item, just saute it in a little bit of oil. You can even add some garlic if you wanted to. Or let's say you had some, who has leftover shrimp? I usually don't have leftover shrimp, but if you did, as long as it was cooked, you could use it. So yes, the shrimp does have to be cooked, just like if you're substituting any other protein. So if it was roast salmon or roasted chicken, anything like that, it does have to be cooked, okay? And that's what also makes this recipe come together really quickly, because essentially the broccoli was cooked, shrimp's cooked, and now we're just, you know, the sauce comes together really, really nice and easily. So that's always what I'm a fan of. Okay.
Super. Hey, Emily. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Go ahead. I was just going to say, okay. why don't we have everyone show us what they're stuffing?
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. And you don't have to move your camera. If you can just like lift your shell and your filling like that to your camera, we can see what you're doing.
Oh, there's Lorna. That looks great. Oh, and Lori, they all look so delicious. You guys are going to have, oh, and there we go. Yep. So good. All looks great. There we go. Elkie too. That's great. Super.
Emily, I have a question. Do you ever make your bechamel or your white sauce in the microwave? Because our family does that actually pretty successfully, and it works great. Just wondering if you ever do that.
I have done that. And you know, when I've done it, when I've had to cook elsewhere, and I find out when I get there, they only have a microwave. And so I think it's a great way to kind of speed things up. You do have to be attentive. So I think that's one of the things that, you know, I love when we're all cooking together and making the note of, you know, paying attention to things. So popping it into a microwavable bowl. So I typically use glass. And then, you know, that kind of in and out of the microwave. How long does yours take in the microwave? Like, do you have an average time?
Yeah, we make a lot of cheese sauce here. So we do this like all the time. The tried and true method is actually pretty simple, and it's pretty no fail. You set it on high and take it out to whisk it well every 2 minutes. And then what we do is just keep tasting it until, you know, the flour is cooked and it's starting to thicken up, and then you can throw basically anything you want into it. So, but you don't have to watch it like you do on the stove, because you're not worried about it burning.
Well, no, because you have that little timer going off telling you to come back and check it, right? So that's the good part. And then do you ever just like at the end, if you're separating it out, do you add some cheese to it for, you know, a cheese sauce, and then something else to it if you're dividing it up?
Definitely. We usually will throw in some pesto, some parmesan, you know, kind of make that easy sauce, throw it on some pasta. But, you know, like you said, you can kind of throw anything into it once you've got the basics down.
And I think that sometimes, you know, I mean, I love making fancy things and spending time in the kitchen, but sometimes I think we forget about those simpler things, right? Like just like a bechamel sauce, a milk-based sauce that you can do so much with. And so it's nice to kind of go back to those simple, easier. And I hope that it appeared easy, because it is easy. And it's really just kind of whisking everything together. And of course, in the microwave, it certainly would be that much easier. So hopefully you filled, or were able to fill, about 16. 4, 8, 12, 16. Oh, I think I counted. There's one more in there. So they should fit comfortably in an 11 by 7. I love this recipe too because you can double it. So if you were planning, you know, let's say someone in the family was having a baby or someone's not feeling well and you wanted to make them a dinner, this recipe could easily be doubled. So if you wanted to double up on that bechamel sauce, I would just use the larger saucepan and you can still make a really nice large amount to share with everybody and just have 2 casserole dishes. So once your shells are full, okay, you're going to take that 1 cup of sauce and drizzle it over top. Now, I should let you know that if you wanted to, you could actually change the color of this sauce. If you had some pasta sauce or some tomato sauce, you could actually just make this into a rosé sauce, okay? So we have the lovely filling here that's white from the bechamel sauce, but if you added, you know, even a 1/2 cup or 1/4 cup of pasta sauce to this, you have a whole new dish. Well, kind of. It's just a different color, but it also has a different little bit of a different flavor. So if you wanted to, you could definitely do that as well, okay? So I'm going to just pour this over top. It should still be nice and fluid, okay, to pour over top. Is everyone okay? We're all good or kind of around the same?
Emily, I have a question.
Yeah.
Did I miss the Parmesan cheese? Were we supposed to add that somewhere or is it still happening?
That's still happening. That goes right
Okay,
on at
good.
the end.
Good, yep. Good. I thought I maybe missed something. Thank you.
Now, if by chance you put it in the sauce, no harm, no foul, it would be okay. But we're actually going to put it right. We're going to put it right on top because that's going to help create a really nice golden hue on top as it bakes. Okay. So I'm just going to drizzle this. Yeah.
Can you freeze one of these recipes?
Oh, I knew that question was going to come up. Yes, you can. And when I would freeze it is after the first bake. And I'm going to tell you that in a second because you'll see what I mean. So I've tried to freeze it like this and it gets really, really watery. So I tend to have to overcook it essentially to kind of have everything come back to the right consistency. And it's, don't get me wrong, still edible, still delicious, but it's not kind of at its best. So I'll tell you when you can freeze it. Now, by the way, you can also take this dish. Now you're going to add your grated Parmesan, okay? Just like this, all over. This is going to give it a great flavor and color. So sprinkle that all over top. And you're going to cover this with foil. I don't have foil. I'm going to get foil. So if you wanted to make this ahead, so let's say you guys don't want to bake this tonight, you're going to cover your casserole dish with plastic wrap and go put it in the fridge. And you can leave it in the fridge. Today's Tuesday. You can bake it on Thursday, okay? It's good for a couple of days in the fridge. You can push it to Friday, but things will start to get watery because of the broccoli, okay? But you can bake this on Thursday night if you want. I'm just gonna cover it with foil. So if you're not cooking this tonight, don't put the foil on. Plastic wrap into the fridge. I'm gonna bake mine. Oh, if you wanna make it look pretty, you can add a little bit more of that parsley that I had extra of, or basil, okay? And then this goes into your 400-degree oven. And you're gonna bake it covered for 15 minutes, okay? And what that does is that kind of heats everything through, that sets the bechamel sauce really nicely. And then this is for the freezer now. You take it out, let it cool completely, wrap it with plastic, put the foil back on, and then put it in the freezer, okay? So that's what you're gonna do to freeze it. So that then when you take it out of the freezer, you can let it thaw in the fridge overnight, put it back, remember to take off the plastic wrap, put it back in the oven, let it heat through, and then you're gonna uncover it for the last 10 minutes, okay? So this is a little bit, that's when I say the 2-step bake process, because you're covering it kind of like lasagna. You typically cover it first, and then that last little bit, you're uncovering it so it gets nice and golden brown. That's why we have that beautiful cheese on top as well. Now, if you wanted something a bit more gooey, you could actually sprinkle a little bit of mozzarella on top as well, okay? That'll give you more of that lasagna feel to the dish so that when you pull it out, you get that nice long stringy cheese, which most people can't say no to. So that's your option there, So that was a great question. Any other questions?
Can I just add one more question to that? Because somebody asked about freezing it in portions. So if you're one person, and I mean, a lot of the time, sometimes as one person, you don't make maybe dishes like this because you think it's just too much, but could they portion it out? And would you have to change the cooking time if they were smaller dishes?
So if you want to portion it out before you bake it, then yes, change the cooking time. But here's what I would recommend. Very similar to the freezer time. There is, you bake it whole, you bake it for 15 minutes. You can take it out and portion it into 4 portions, because 4 shells is really a serving. But if you feel that that's too much, you can reduce that amount. And then you can let them cool and freeze them. And then you can pull them out when you need them, and you can pop them in the microwave, or you can put them back in the oven. The other option is to fully cook them. So do that second bake process and freeze them and then have them on hand. Now, once they're baked, you can keep these in the fridge for a couple of days. So if you wanted to have them for lunch, you know, a couple times in the week, you could bake them tonight, and then tomorrow and Thursday you have lunch already made. But it's nice to have the flexibility to pop them in the freezer, especially in smaller containers, especially if someone's, you know, still going to work, or, you know, you just want to have a quiet lunch at home, that you have that flexibility for it. So hopefully that answers the question. I think I saw a question about Parmesan cheese. Someone needed to know the amount. It's 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese that you sprinkle on top. Okay. I know it may seem like a lot because it's pre-grated cheese, but trust me on this one, it's really, really tasty. You can always use a little less if you want. It's totally okay, because you can add the Parmesan cheese later as well if you wanted to. Okay. So I'm going to admit something to you all tonight. I don't have a finished one. Mine's got to bake just like yours. So I'm going to be posting pictures of mine tonight after it's done, and tagging Osteoporosis Canada so that you guys can see what mine looks like. But I have a very legitimate reason, and I already told Tracie. I did have a television segment today that I recorded for Easter. So I had to make essentially 2 Easter dinners this afternoon. So I kind of didn't have time to make an extra shrimp and herb stuffed shells. So I apologize that I don't have the finished dish, but technically you have it, because you saw that beautiful photo of the finished dish. Is that fair enough to say, Tracie?
I think so. And you know what? I think it's great. It's like we're waiting in anticipation. We're going to get to see the photos that you're going to tag us on Instagram and Facebook. And the only thing we don't get to see is when you take that bite and you tell us how delicious it is. But I think after seeing everything, we'll take your word for it. And how is everyone else? Is everyone else done? Has everyone popped everything into the oven?
Mine looks awesome. I haven't put it in the oven yet, but it sure looks awesome. I'm just going to wait 15 or 20 minutes before we put it in the oven. But yeah, it looks awesome.
And that's the great part about this recipe. Sorry, Lorna, go ahead.
Mine's in the oven and waiting to be delivered to my girls. So thank you for again, as usual. I don't have a pot to show you today. Oh, yes, I do. Today's pot, it's a Borson keeper in case your Borson gets dried out.
Oh,
won't dry out.
Nice.
And speaking of Borson, you could actually use that instead of the plain cream cheese. So
well, actually, that's why there's nothing in it, because I used it already.
How did I already know? How did I already know?
It's all good, baby. It's all good. It's all good. Thank you again, as usual.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Or I know you can't show us anything yet because it's not done, but for those of you that are on Instagram or Facebook, make sure you take a picture of your, so Jen, is yours done? No, it's just going into the oven. Okay.
In the oven. I split it in 2 because I was thinking that I'd cook them like you had suggested and then freeze one, but now that they smell so good, I'm not sure that half of it
gonna last.
I might just cook them all and we'll just eat leftovers tomorrow instead.
That's always a good idea too.
I had a hamburger tonight. It was good. It was a great recipe too. Good family, a little bit of chopping. It was nice. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks very much. And anybody,
did somebody else have a question? I'm sorry?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to do a little thing there. Anybody in Winnipeg, please feel free to give me a call if you want any info or want to know what's going on in Winnipeg.
Yes, Sandy is our community engagement coordinator locally. So you can get on our website. You've got contact information there because we always have great stuff happening in that area. Sure. And I think, does anyone have any of our participants have questions? I think Emily actually been great. You answered as usual. Everything. Oh, look, we just had one. Yes, we did. So I did post the recipe in the chat for the participants. It is also available on the website at osteoporosis.ca/recipes, but we will be emailing because this has been recorded. So in about a day or so, all of the people who've registered will be able to watch the webinar again and will be sent the link for the recipe. And of course, I've also posted it on Facebook. So it's in lots of different places. We've got lots of people saying, Emily, how delicious this all looks, and they can't wait to make it.
Awesome. I'm gonna do one more shout out, Tracie, because this recipe is everywhere, but I'm only doing this. This is a selfish. I can't even talk anymore. So for those of you that joined us on the webinar and think that recipe looks awfully familiar, it's actually originated in my cookbook Per la Famiglia. It's a traditional Italian, not traditional 100%, but it's typically a fish dish served during the holidays, whether it's Easter or Christmas. So I thought the timing was perfect, Tracie, to share this recipe. And so and for those of you that are looking at this book and now saying, maybe I should get that book, hopefully you will be able to soon. Hopefully by June, it will be available back in Canada. Now that ship got loose in the Suez Canal, I think we might be okay.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's great. Yes. And we've actually, a few of the recipes that we have on the website actually are from Emily's cookbook, actually from a couple of her cookbooks. So like I said, we posted the link. You can kind of take a look through there. And then eventually, because I'm lucky enough, I do actually have a copy of that and I do cook from it. So it's great. So Emily, I think, you know what? I think everyone is we're just waiting to have everything shared so that they can serve it up. We really want to thank Emily for a great cooking class. And this is where you can get a lot of the information. So osteoporosis.ca is our website. And there's a great tool that we have. It's a calculate your calcium. It's a calculator to calculate your calcium, as I just said. It's on the website. You can put all different kinds of foods in there. There's milk and alternatives, fruits and vegetables, grains, others, legumes, protein, some that have a bit of calcium in there. You can kind of figure out, what you're making. Remember to read your product labels to find out how much calcium and protein you're getting per serving. Again, you're going to find your recipes on the OC website. There's also, if you want to know your risk for osteoporosis, it's the Know Your Risk quiz. You can take the quiz. And we have OC replay. So you can find previously recorded webinars for cook-alongs, cooking demos, also in webinars on exercise, osteoporosis, medication and treatment, lots of different things. It's all on osteoporosis.ca. And really want to thank our partners again. So the Winnipeg Foundation, who helped make this possible. Emily, who's always amazing, who helps us with our recipe development and with presenting such delicious options for getting our nutrients for our strong and healthy bones. And DeLuca's in Winnipeg, who did all the food delivery for us. We're getting asked if we have more cook-alongs coming up and more cooking demos. And the answer is yes. We haven't confirmed locations. We're trying to see if there's other areas in Canada that we can be offering this program. So the best thing to do is sign up for a national newsletter. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We post all our information there. And in the next couple of months, you should start seeing some new opportunities to cook along and learn with us. But we really want to thank everyone again. We want to thank everyone watching on Facebook Live. Everyone who registered on Zoom. We hope that you stay safe, stay well, please stay connected, and have a great rest of your day and have a delicious meal this evening if you've made this dish. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.